Hi, everyone. We're going to get started right now. So hopefully you can hear me and we'll go ahead and jump in. So my name is Alana Davis and I am your host and meetup organizer. I work with e-commerce shops to remove friction from the buying process, and I rescue Shopify websites, making them more effective in attracting more visitors, providing better SEO, and increasing conversion rates at a fraction of the cost of a full redesign. Here's a quick look at our agenda today. We will have our speaker starting in just a minute, and I hope to wrap up pretty quickly at around 4:30. But if it does take a little longer, I hope they'll be able to hang out with us as we go. So the webinar is going to be recorded, and assuming everything works, I will be sharing the video in the next couple of days with you. So we've got a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and jump right on in. First, a quick shout out to our sponsors. Shopify is more than just an e-commerce solution. You can sell anywhere to anyone with Shopify's e-commerce platform and point of sale features. And then Eric Davis of Little Stream Software, the maker of JSON LD for SEO, helps your Shopify store win rich results in Google search, getting you more organic traffic that converts better, all without having to fight for better rankings or pay constantly for ads. I'm going to share their links with you in the chat so that you'll be able to check them out if you need to. Quick shout out to a future event coming up next month. It's going to be called Giving Back in 2020 and how to use creative cause marketing campaigns to deepen customer loyalty and increase your average order value. We also have a Facebook group. So if you're not familiar or haven't joined us, please do. We do ask that you're local to Portland if you're going to join us so that we can kind of foster that community here. But I've had some feedback requesting for feedback for Facebook groups. So please participate and help to build the community because I don't want to do it just by myself. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Osa. Osa is the founder and CEO of Parrot Mob. So welcome, Osa.
Hey there, folks. Great. Thank you, Alana, for the handoff, and really great to be here and talk with everyone. Very excited to share some information with you today around SMS and how it relates to Shopify. I'm going to quickly present my screen and get started. We'll leave space at the end for questions, but feel free to ask those, and we'll get those answered before the presentation is over. Hey there, Lana. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great, awesome. So without getting started, today we're going to talk about SMS and how it relates to Shopify. I know a lot of folks here are Shopify store owners or really interested in this space. And I'm going to talk specifically about Shopify, but a lot of the things we'll talk about applies to e-commerce generally. So feel free to make that analogy. A bit more about myself. My name is Osa Gaius. I am the CEO of a company called Parrot Mob, and we help e-commerce brands leverage SMS. And we have some unique offerings that I'll kind of talk about at the end of this. But this isn't really a sales pitch. It's really here. We're really here to kind of help you educate yourself and learn more about SMS and think about how to apply that to your business. So the first thing I'll kind of just talk about is the fact that SMS marketing sucks, right? I think this is like something that a lot of folks want to dance around, but as a consumer, it's very annoying to get a text blast from a company at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. And if you're like me, your phone is very sacred. It's where you talk to your family and your friends. And so SMS marketing can get a bad rap, and historically has gotten a bad rap because businesses kind of use it as a way to kind of nudge people over and over again to buy something that they don't really want to buy. Secondarily, it's also very difficult from a business perspective because there are a bunch of regulations that you have to keep in mind when you begin marketing over SMS. It's not like email where you can buy lists and kind of do things like that. In the case of SMS, there are very high costs to getting into the space. So I think that's sort of a thing I would use to kind of frame the conversation because it does affect how you think about it. So instead of talking about SMS marketing theoretically, what I like to do is use a very specific example of a problem that SMS can solve for your business. Let's talk about e-commerce traffic, right? When you look at the data coming out of Shopify's sort of annual reports, one thing that they mention over and over is that massive amounts of traffic are coming from mobile, right? So this means a lot of your customers are coming to your site on a mobile device, right? This is how they're shopping. If you think about Gen Z and millennial customers, this is how they prefer to shop. They're always on their phones. They're always on Instagram. And so a lot of your traffic comes from there. You might even be driving advertising on social to your website. So folks are coming to you on mobile, but the challenge about this is some stores we're seeing are getting 97% or north of 90% of their traffic from mobile, right? So very quickly your site has to essentially become a mobile store, although that may not have been the intention when you built your site the first time. Now, what's particularly problematic about this is that 80% of mobile carts, right? So people who come to your site from a mobile device and start checking out, 80% of those folks will never actually complete their cart. And this number here is very interesting because it's based on an average of 41 studies in the last 20 years, right? And the primary reasons that the researchers have found for this large abandonment problem is that one, there are a lot of extra charges that people don't think about when they're buying something on your site, like shipping and taxes. But actually the vast majority of this kind of problem can be simplified to, it's actually really difficult to check out on most websites on your phone because you got to pull out your credit card, you got to maybe remember the number. There's all this kind of challenges that come with using a website that originally wasn't really meant to be used on a mobile phone. Now, why mobile really matters is that most of the people who fail to convert on your website, just based on the numbers alone, are going to be actually abandoning their cart on a phone. So any solution that you kind of think about to approach this problem, I would argue should prioritize mobile. It should prioritize the mobile shopper's experience. For instance, think about yourself trying to buy something from a store you never bought from before. How would that experience feel if you were on your phone and you couldn't, rush to a computer and complete the process? And so as we begin to think about the rest of this conversation, I'd like you to kind of put that hat on of, I'm a consumer, I'm on a phone, and I'm trying to actually think about how to check out. So the first problem I have to think through is what I call the conversion optimization problem. Some of you are familiar with this. Various versions of this kind of argument exist in computer science theory and economic research. Essentially, this argument says that you have a bucket, and the question is, how can you fill up that bucket as quickly as possible? Now, that becomes really challenging if there's a hole in the bucket, or in some cases, multiple holes. And so you can think of your site or your funnel as such, right? You have people coming into your site, and you ultimately want them to buy something. But at some point, driving more people to your online store won't matter if 70% or 80% of them don't complete the order. The lost sales, right, you get, and the money you spend on marketing, won't really add up, right? And so I would argue that it's very important to think through how you increase your conversions, especially in times like this where businesses are struggling. You're trying to figure out kind of the mechanics of your business, but also folks are shopping online at an increasing level. It's very important to make sure that folks who drive to your site actually complete the order. And this is, again, this cart abandonment problem. So let's think about this particular problem and how a lot of folks solve this right now. The first approach a lot of folks take is email, right? Just if someone abandons their cart, whether it's MailChimp, Klaviyo, whatever choice you choose, just send them an email and hope that they will actually come back and complete their order. The challenge with this strategy to the conversion optimization problem is that the open rates for email continue to decrease, right? The report released by MailChimp last year says that 15 out of 100 people will ever open an abandoned cart email, right? Whereas 2 out of 100 will actually click through to then go back and complete the order on your site. So email, while very simple to turn on and get started when thinking about how to solve this conversion problem, unfortunately doesn't really get at the heart of it because the person's already left your site, and if you're counting on the email to bring them back, they probably won't, right? Given that only 2% click through. The second solution that I see a lot of folks kind of using is that they have a pop-up on their site. Some people call it an exit intent, some people call it a win back pop-up, but essentially it tells people, hey, you're about to leave my site. I know you didn't check out yet. Please check out. And it offers you a way to kind of collect their email or maybe prompt them to use a discount before they leave. Again, this is a good solution, right? But doesn't really solve the problem, again, because folks are already leaving your site, and in many cases, you're counting on email again to get them back. The last solution I'll talk through that I see a lot of folks, kind of choosing is retargeting ads, right? So someone comes to the site, they, start to buy, and then they eventually choose, to kind of abandon their cart, or to be honest, they just forget and don't come back the next day. Retargeting ads are, I'm sure, a way that some of you are familiar with. It just allows you to target that person on Facebook, if you have the Facebook pixel enabled, or on Google. And what you're trying to do is to show them advertising that gets them to come back to your site and hopefully complete that order or buy that thing that they expressed interest in buying in the first place. So now that we've looked at all the existing ways that folks try to solve this abandoned cart problem and try to improve their conversions, I think it's important now for us to look at how texting your customers might be an interesting solution to the problem, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be the right solution, but I want to think through it as a possible solution so we can then start talking about, one way that you can think about SMS being useful for your business. So let's talk through SMS with regards to email. So SMS, right, provides you, in many cases, much, much better open rates and much better click-through rates, right? So what we see a lot of folks doing is they, just have a pop-up on their site to collect phone numbers, and they offer people discounts that way. But again, that doesn't really get at the problem of conversions, right? Because what you really want to do is get people to start buying something and leave your website to come back. So one solution we've seen a lot of folks do is send people a text. So if someone buys something from your site, or they start buying and they don't complete the checkout, you can simply send them a text 2 hours later or 24 hours later and say, hey, here's a discount. We'd love if you came back and completed your order. We see this working out well for brands, and we think it's a really viable solution. The other kind of approach is to actually offer a pop-up and say, hey, as soon as you get to our website, before you actually start checking out, here's a 20% discount, or here's free shipping. And that sort of pushes people, towards the completion of that purchase. It kind of helps address some of the challenges that they might have when they actually start to check out. But although SMS can seem promising, I think before we dive further into what SMS can do and why it can be great to solve this conversion problem, I think it's important to differentiate SMS from email, right? Because there are significant legal hurdles that you should be aware of when even, thinking about it and choosing, vendors to kind of help you solve this problem. So SMS by default is actually designed to prevent spam from ever happening, right? And the government and carriers like AT&T and T-Mobile take spamming very, very seriously, right? Because unlike email, SMS wasn't really built to be an open protocol where anyone, including Gmail and Yahoo, can just send stuff, right? It's meant to be really isolated. It's meant to be really protected because the mobile phone is kind of sacred from the perspective of the government as well as the carriers. So the key regulation that governs SMS is referred to as the TCPA. That's a shorthand. The full name of the legal statute is the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. It is especially focuses on SMS with regards to consent. It makes the argument that you need explicit consent from a consumer to ever send them a text, right? So in the case of email, you can have weird situations like single opt-in, double opt-in. In the case of SMS, you cannot text the consumer unless they text you first, right? When it comes to marketing, right? When it comes to things like order notifications, telling people like their phone bill is due, those are a bit looser, right? But when it comes to marketing to people and telling them to buy stuff or telling them you got a discount, or telling them to come back and complete their order, consent has to be explicit. And in many cases, most of the carriers want the customer to reach out to you first, right? They don't want you to reach out to the customer without the customer ever messaging you directly first. So again, there's significant constraints here. The second challenge with SMS when it comes to the TCPA is that the TCPA says really should only text people between 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. in their time zone. So if you've got a customer on the East Coast, but you're in the West Coast, you still have to honor their sort of like window of 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. So again, that introduces some complexity, and you have to think through that when it comes to your marketing strategy, because if you want to release a campaign and it's going to be 8 a.m., it's going to be before 8 a.m. in that person's time zone, you should make sure that that person does not receive the text until 8 a.m. Now, the last part of the TCPA is that it imposes mandatory minimums on every infraction, right? So, and this is a bit confusing for some folks because it's not based on, the amounts of text you send. It's based on each text itself. So if you send 1,000 text messages that are not, approved at a TCPA, whether it's because of consent or it's because of the time in which you sent it, for each of those text messages, you actually get a kind of a fine applied to you. So it's very, very important that we kind of spend time thinking about a TCPA. I'd recommend you go on Wikipedia and kind of, read through it, or go on YouTube and kind of spend some time, because it does restrict the amount of flexibility that you have. And it's something you should be very careful when kind of thinking through. Now, the scary part's over. Let's talk about SMS versus email, right? When we look at the open rates for SMS, some studies have it at 95%. The number I really like to focus on is the click-through rate, right? So some studies we've seen that are, of course, blended are gesturing towards this 30% number, right? Now, I'll be honest, I've dug into this number a bit more. 30% isn't really right. Somewhere between 5 to 10 is actually kind of the industry standard. But what I will say is 5 to 10% is significantly better than the 2% that e-commerce gets on average when we look at email, right? And one anecdote I pulled from one of our early customers was this phrase: text them when they forget, right? But they actually misphrased this, right? They said text them when they forget. I was actually texting them back and forth, but I liked this phrase because it's so simple, right? If someone forgets, or if someone leaves your site, text them. If you have a sale or an announcement, text them, because that's how your younger customers, and generally all your customers nowadays, that's how they're interacting. That's where they spend their time. So when we think about what an abandoned cart message would look like, or something that tries to get people back to your site, here's a really good example, right? In this case, the business is reaching out to the consumer and saying, hey, first name in this case, Megan, your cart's almost expired. In this case, they're offering a small discount. They're saying, here's free shipping until tomorrow. Again, this brand here is trying to kind of help the person get over that hump, help the person kind of complete the purchase by offering free shipping. You'll notice here that they're including an image of the product. We think that's super important if you're going to leverage SMS, is to make sure that you have images of the folks of the products that you're trying to sell, because that really helps engage people. And then last bit here, you'll notice that it says stop to opt out at the bottom. This is very important. It's very important that you tell people in every message, or as often as you can, that they can actually check out, right? Usually your vendor or your SMS platform should do this for you, but you should make sure to kind of test this out yourself when you're building your first kinds of campaigns, to make sure that you're meeting the regulations and you're telling people how they can get off your list if they want to be. So let's talk about the mobile pop-up. I talked about this before. It's important that when someone's on your site, that they be able to give you their phone number in an easy way, right? One way is to collect the phone number at opt-out, which is a setting you can change in your Shopify store. But another is to have a pop-up on your site that kind of gives people an incentive to give you their phone number before they even start shopping, right? Before they even kind of get to the checkout process. This could be 10%, it could be free shipping, whatever it is you want to give people. I think it's just important to drive home here that your goal should be to drive significant value. If someone gives you their phone number, think about yourself, right? Like, what would you want if you gave your favorite brand your phone number? And then design, make sure that, whatever you have on your site that's collecting phone numbers fits your brand, feels like your brand, doesn't feel like some random thing that's on your site, because that can be very jarring. And to some consumers, it can be a turnoff because it doesn't feel like they're shopping on your site. It doesn't feel like they're giving you their phone number. It might feel like they're giving someone else their phone number, which can cause some confusion. So here's an example of a great pop-up from a brand called Hydrant. I love their product. And you can see here at the bottom, of the screen on the bottom left, it has a little prompt that says, hey, get 5% off. And it's sort of subdued because you don't want to interrupt the seller or interrupt the buyer as they're kind of going through your site and experiencing your site for the first time. But if they tap that little icon, it tells them, hey, you can save $5 when you subscribe to texts. And all they have to do is click the button and they actually just open their SMS app and subscribe. There are different ways to do this, but again, this is an experience that feels very simple and feels very native to Hydrant's website, but you want to make sure to do that whenever you get around to implementing SMS. So the last areas I'm going to explore are why now, right? Why should you think about SMS now? I think why should you spend your time thinking about the TCPA, thinking about how to implement SMS in this particular moment, right? The number I would kind of call out here is that 82% of consumers, when you send them a text message, right? And again, in this context, you're the business, you're messaging them. 82% of folks will look at that text within 5 minutes. Right. And that makes sense. Like I do the same thing when I'm, hanging around the house or when I'm working. I'll always look at my phone just to make sure, if my family texts me or my friends text me that I'm available. So for you as a business, this can be really valuable because if you have something you want to tell folks and it's, urgent and it's timely and it's personal, SMS is the way to reach them, right? Because they'll continue to kind of look at that and they'll think about it at least. The second reason that this moment is really important is because as folks continue to look at their phones and spend a lot of time on mobile, especially post-COVID, the cost for you as a business to continue to send messages is actually declining, right? It's currently a fraction of a cent, but that number keeps reducing. So every text you send to a consumer is now much cheaper than it would have been 10 years ago. The last trend that I'll call out here is that email is getting saturated, right? Everyone's sending emails, everyone's competing to be in the email inbox. And so for you as a brand, that can be very, very challenging because you're not competing just on Facebook or Instagram. You're now competing in the email inbox. And with the rise of spam filters, with the improvements that Google has made to Gmail's product, it's very, very hard for you to get visibility in the email inbox, either because you get filtered out, you get put in the promotions category, or at worst, folks just don't ever look at it, right? And so SMS can be an opportunity to kind of really think about how to reach people in a different way. So when it comes to platforms you can look at, right, I think there are three in particular that I sort of always recommend people just do some research into. The first is Attentive Mobile. They are an SMS platform that are really focused on helping larger brands, think Jack in the Box. They really are really good at that. The second is Postscript. They are a newer company that launched about last year, and they're also focused on helping Shopify brands get started with SMS marketing. They are really focused on kind of small and medium-sized brands. So if you fit that category, I recommend you take a look at their website. And then the last is SMS Bump. They've been around for quite some time, a few years now. They've actually just been acquired by Yotpo. So if you already use Yotpo, it might make sense to look into them. But they're very interesting. They have a lot of really cool flows that you can kind of try out and play with. All three of these, make sense based on where you're at. I think if you're a smaller brand or a medium-sized brand, I would look at Postscript and SMS Bump just because of their pricing structures. And if you're a larger brand, I would definitely look into Attentive and just go book demos with all these folks and try to get on the phone with them and see, if they can cater to your business and kind of help you on your journey. The couple of things that I would think through as you start choosing a platform. The first that I would say you should think about is, how does the SMS platform you choose integrate with your existing tools, right? For instance, if you're using Klaviyo, how does it integrate with Klaviyo? If you're using a tool that helps you build your rewards program, how does it integrate with your rewards program? Like these sorts of things are things you should think about because you want to make sure that SMS is part of your overall strategy for your business, right? Even though it might start as primarily a tool for you to recover some abandoned carts, you should definitely make sure to think about the long-term strategy because it is a significant investment of your time and resources. The next thing I would think about is, how does the platform you choose help you build your list, right? Many of you will start day one and you will not have a list that is a list of phone numbers from people who've specifically opted in to give you their phone number, right? And that last bit is super important. You want to make sure that you're building your list in a way that's compliant, and you also want to make sure that as you build that list, it's portable, right? So if you choose to leave a certain platform or increase your spend, that list can kind of move around with you depending on where you go. And then the last thing I would say to think about when it comes to choosing a platform is transactions, right? We talked about before, it's very easy to send people a bunch of text messages and they'll read it within 5 minutes. But as a consumer, that can get very annoying. So folks can kind of get to the place where, if you're sending them one text a week, but it's just a 10% discount or it's something like free shipping, folks will start to mentally tune you out, right? They will start to, treat your texts mentally the same way they treat email spam. I've seen this, in my own interactions, but also in the data that we've collected after sending, over 1 million text messages. And what I'll say on this is that you want to make sure that your texts get people to take action. And one action could be getting them to just, click on your link and go to your website and, participate in a flash sale. But I would argue that it's very important that you move to platforms over time that can help you let people just buy over the text, right? Because you want to make sure that you're giving them value, you're giving them immediacy, you're having conversations with them, not just, blasting them once a week. So before I wrap up, I'd love to, show you a quick video demonstrating, what Parrot Mob is. I promised Alana this wasn't a sales pitch, so I'll kind of show you a cool video on what we're working on, and I'll talk a little bit about it as it goes on. But what I'll show you in this experience is we're really focused on when someone's on your website, how do you give them one button they can click that they can use to just buy something from you, right? In this case, the person just checks out, they get a 20% discount over text. But now that they bought, you have an opportunity to actually have a conversation with them and ask them if they want to try other things. And you can recommend products to them and just have them buy over the text. We think this is where you should be thinking about your long-term SMS strategy. How do you go beyond just kind of sending people a link once a week? And how do you actually move them into a world in which they're actually communicating with your brand and building a relationship with you? So this is what Parrot Mob is focused on. We're actually not, one of the SMS marketing tools that I mentioned before. We're sort of more focused on the SMS payment space and how to help you sell over text and unlock that channel, similar to Instagram shopping. But we think, it only really makes sense once your brand has hit a certain scale. So if you're interested, please go to parrotmob.com and check us out, and feel free to reach out to us, and we'd love to, show you what we're working on. But what I'd say is, SMS is really, really powerful. It can be one of the best channels for your business, but you want to make sure that you're thinking very clearly about the regulations that affect it. You want to make sure that you have a long-term strategy for making sure your engagement stays high. You want to make sure that you leverage it to solve your conversion problems in the short term. And I would say think of it, alongside social, think of it alongside email, and make sure that you have a long-term strategy in place. But please reach out to us if you need anything, or if you have any questions about SMS, we'd love to answer them. Alana, that's it for me, and I'll open up for any questions.
Wow, thank you so much. When Osa and I first started talking about doing an SMS marketing webinar, I was like, I don't know about SMS. It's not really for me. I don't know what people are going to think, but that was amazing. Osa, like, I just had no idea, all of the different ins and outs around what's required and how and when to notify people and that sort of thing. So I definitely have some questions. I see a couple of them coming in. So I'm going to ask some as I see them join, and then I'll definitely be reading out your questions as well. One of the things I wanted to ask really quickly, because you had just shown the transaction example for Parrot Mob, is that a bot, or is it a bot and or a person, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, so the fancy term for it is human assisted AI. But to your point, it's a combination of both. We think that there are things that humans are really good at, right? There's things that about your brand that a bot will never be able to answer. And then there are things that bots are really good at, like getting someone's credit card information, or, sending them 3 things you think they would like. We think computers are really good at that, and we should let computers do that. But our interface lets a human being jump in whenever you want and take over the conversation. We think that's very important, that you don't treat people as sort of disposable. It's really important that you let them know that there's a human being on the other end of the text message.
Very cool. I love it. One of the other question that I had was early on when you were going over your hydrant example, you gave examples of the consent that's required. Yep, right there. Um, One of the things that I ran into with some of my clients is they felt that this text is really long and it becomes a little bit cumbersome to their design. Do you have any guidance on the language that's actually required and or how they can get around from like this large block of text that's here?
Great question. So we actually a few months ago went back and forth with the phone carriers, AT&T, Sprint, etc., on this. And what I'll say is, for now, the carriers are pretty opinionated that you need this text. They have refused to relax that requirement, and so that's why you see. So in this case, this pop-up is actually built by PostScript. We offer a similar pop-up again because we think it's important to build your list. But the phone carriers have told both us and the other platforms that you cannot reduce the text on this page, like this little prompt that says by signing up via text. Now, will they relax that requirement over time? I think they will. But I think for now, to protect yourself from any liability, it's important to just comply and show them all this text, even though it might be annoying and kind of ugly on the website.
Perfect. Yes, this this video is being recorded and it will hopefully be available later on during the week, assuming that everything works out. So it will definitely be shared if it all works. So let's go ahead and jump into some of your questions. So there's a question: when does it make sense to focus on one channel SMS versus multi-channel SMS email retargeting?
Great question. I think this might be a better question for you, Alana, but I'll take a stab at it and you can jump in. I think for a lot of businesses, when you're starting out, I'll throw a rough number out there. Let's say like below 100K per year. I think it's very smart to pick one channel, right? Do one thing really well. For some brands we work with, that's social, right? Like they're just killing it on Instagram. For other brands, it's Facebook. For some, it's email, right? If it makes sense. I think every brand should choose the channel that you're getting the most traction on and spend time there. But once you kind of pass that number, you feel solid in your business, then I think, yeah, it definitely makes sense to start experimenting with 2 or 3 channels and see which one works better, right? But it's always important to have your core bread and butter channel, even if that's paid advertising on Facebook, right? It's still a good channel, even though it's paid. So that's how I think about channels, even when I think about how we do marketing at Parrot Mob.
Yeah, I actually echo that exact same thing. I actually had someone who argued with me about this in the past, and I'm like, look, when you're just getting started and you're not really sure where your audience is, like focus on one thing, see if it works, and then you can adjust. If you focus on 10 different things, it becomes really cumbersome to understand how to track what's working, what's not working, and then pivot. It's too difficult to track a lot of those different methods of your marketing. So I always say the same thing: try to start with one thing, see how it works, maybe start with 2 things. But then also, you only have so much money to spend, and you have to decide where you want to put those funds. And if you spread them so thin, you're going to invest so much in your marketing that you're going to bankrupt your entire business. So there has to be that give and take of trial and error as you go through it. Okay, and then there's another question about how do you reach or gain customers? I just launched my store and I still haven't gotten one sale yet. Any tips? Thank you.
Again, this might be a better question for you, but I think, one thing that I think a lot about is, what is your story, right? Like, why did you create the brand? Why did you launch the store? Who are the people you were trying to reach when you started the store, right? And I think it's actually easier if you start there and just go find those people, right? Like if you an example, if I built a store to sell, t-shirts to programmers, like my first task would be, let me go find all the programmers I know and then send them, my products, send them a link to my site and just beg them to use my thing. I think sometimes doing things that are not scalable, like things that, are hard and maybe not as exciting, can be the best way to kind of get your first sale. So I would say Facebook groups, Instagram communities, just find wherever you think people would resonate with your product and just kind of beg people to look at it. And people are very generous, and they will kind of do you a favor and share it, and some will even just buy it.
Yeah, I think that question that you're asking is very challenging because there could be a lot of reasons why people aren't buying on your site, right? It could be that if you have the traffic coming to your site, but you don't have the user experience nailed down, for example, and so they physically cannot make a purchase. Or you have the traffic coming to your site, but it's the wrong traffic coming to your site. So that's a really difficult question to answer without knowing any context or anything like that. So if you want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to give some pointers, I guess, but it is really challenging to say. The thing that I often tell folks is if you're not getting a single sale that's beyond your family and friends, is to have someone who's never been to your website sit next to you and try to go through and make a purchase. And you can refund them, don't actually go through it, but have them go through and make a purchase. Don't talk to them. Don't try to explain anything on your website. Just see what their experience is and learn from them. Just watch, just observe. And you would be shocked the things that you, as the merchant, the owner of the store, make assumptions on. Like you assume people can figure out how to make a purchase, but maybe they can't. Maybe you're making it more complicated than it has to be. So I hope that helps. It's kind of a broad question and a broad answer. Okay. How is SMS platform like Postscript or Attentive different than what Parrot Mob is doing with paying by text?
Yeah, I think it's categorically different, right? And that's important. It's like two different categories when you kind of think about what we do. SMS marketing platforms like Postscript and Parrot Mob, Postscript and Attentive rather, are really focused on helping you do what I call text blasts, right? So you've got a list of 1,000 people, you send them a text every week, and you include a link to your Shopify store, and you hope that some of them will buy by clicking your link, right? But what we're really focused on is if someone's already on your site, right, and they're about to buy something, how do you get them to buy in the quickest way possible? And we provide what we call a one-click checkout. So if someone presses one button, and if they have their card on file with Parrot Mob, which again, we have a network of Shopify stores, they check out in 1 second, right? So think of the Amazon one-click experience that we're all used to. If you use Amazon Prime, that's the experience you want to bring to your Shopify store. You want to make that very easy. And then once someone's bought the first time, we want to make it easy for you to tell them about new things. If you release a new product tomorrow and you send them that product and they like it and they reply yes, we just send them that product, right? Or you send them that product. We make sure the order happens. So we're really focused on simplifying the purchase experience, whereas Postscript and Attentive are really focused on, helping you kind of drive traffic to your website through kind of outbound messaging. Yeah.
Perfect. And then let's see, when you said that this is for companies at a certain scale, what are some of the requirements to be able to use SMS effectively? Is it a certain number of customers, a certain dollar amount in terms of revenue, etc.?
Yeah, good point. So what I really meant there was that, Parrot Mob really only makes sense for brands who've kind of passed what I call product market fit, right? So, for some people that's 10K a month, for some people it's 50K a month, right? But what I'll say for SMS marketing more generally is that if you want to do SMS marketing, I wouldn't say you need a certain number of customers to start trying it. You can, there's a platform called SMS Bump that I think has a free plan. So that's a really good place to kind of look at, trying if you, want to just experiment with it and see if it works for your business. And it's important to remember that SMS does cost a bit more than email, right? So, we're talking, somewhere like a cent to send a message, right? In some cases, and if you want to add a picture to it, the prices go up a little bit. So it's important to kind of scope that out in your budget, because unlike posting on social, SMS does cost a sizable amount of money to kind of really get skilled up.
Okay, and then a lot of our demographic is older. We're worried that SMS may not be conducive to our audience. Is there a target age group where SMS is more effective?
I think the data on this isn't great. I have not seen any data that indicates that people who are older don't, engage with text as much. I mean, my parents text back and forth, and they're older. So I don't really, I think that argument is a good argument that some people make, but what I would say is you won't know the answer to this question until you try it. So, if you're interested in like seeing if SMS work for your business, I would just say, just try it. Even if you feel like your brand has a bunch of older folks, 'cause you got to remember, especially during COVID, my mom is buying groceries through text message, right? Or she's buying groceries through her phone. So I think a lot of people are more normalized to texting back and forth than we'd imagine. So I think it's a good strategy to just try it and then see what happens.
Yeah, I think I would agree to that. I think, so much has changed over the last 6 months that people are, there's a lot of unknown right now. And I think everyone is so different in the way that they have their normal habits of how they shop. So I would say, even if you think your demographic is older, give it a shot. Worst case scenario, you stop. That's part of testing and trying different marketing techniques, is that you give it a shot and see what works. What the question that I have on follow-up to this is, for me, if something comes to my text message, I usually assume that if it's not a friend of mine, it's spam. And so I usually, maybe it's me, but I usually will just open it up and either I just reply back with stop, or I just delete it and I move on with my day. So I'm curious, Osa, have you had that happen? Is that, impacted the success of this at all? And maybe I'm just the minority.
No, I think you're on to something that is not being talked about in this space, and that's kind of why I don't talk about Parrot Mob as a SMS marketing tool, because we're not. But I think there was a time in which we helped some of our customers do some SMS marketing work, and what we found was that a lot of folks will get a text from you, right? The first couple of times, maybe the first week or so, maybe a couple of weeks, and they will either opt out or they would completely disengage. And I think the complete disengagement factor is something that brands need to be thinking about seriously, because although people don't opt out of your texts, to Alana's point, they essentially in their mind think of whatever you're sending them as spam, right? And that isn't what you want, right? You don't want to send people texts if they think you're a spammer, right? Because some people just won't opt out because they just don't know how to opt out, right? Because some platforms don't tell people how to opt out on a regular basis. So I think it's very important that when you start doing SMS, to start small, right? Take 10% of your list and reach out to them, right? And do it slowly, because what you want to be tracking is not opt-out rates. What you want to be tracking is engagement. So how many people click through? If it's 2%, I'd be worried, right? Because in people's minds, you might already have become the spam company from Shopify that sends them messages. And that's a dangerous place to be as a brand, because disengagement is very, very costly.
Yeah, and I've even asked my peers to see, what their success rate has been with their store owners using SMS, and they I think they kind of have the same mentality as I do, where it's like, I hate to receive texts, but you know what, they work, and so why not give it a shot? So I do think that there is value in giving things like this a try. And maybe I am an old fogey that's not really that old, but I just need to give it a shot too. But I do think that there probably is a lot of value in trying something that's new that isn't as saturated as email, for sure. Okay, so Sarah is asking again, and I'm just going to circle back to this. So Sarah, you're selling lashes and you're a makeup artist, and so you've been trying to reach out to your peers, but still nothing on your store. I would say also, when you said lashes and a makeup artist, keep in mind that the products that you're selling, if it's a saturated market, you could be talking till your eyes turn blue, and still not making a sale because you don't have an original marketing stance, or you don't have something that puts you above someone else who is selling the exact same thing or something similar. So I would still take a look at your store and see, are you communicating clearly the benefits, the risk associated with it? What are the different steps someone has to do to be able to apply your product, those sort of things. Educate them. You can use things like email to educate people, to attract them to your site. But again, it's still pretty difficult to know without actually looking at your site what could be issues. But 90% of the time when someone says, I'm not making any sales, the problem isn't sales. It's probably something else. There's probably something else going on, as I said, either with your site where you have a user experience issue or you're getting the wrong traffic to your site or whatever. But it's the stuff that happens before the sale that is causing the lack of sales, if that makes sense. So feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to chat with you more specifically on your store. But I just wanted to address that live because I feel like a lot of people don't understand that sales are typically not your problem. There's something else going on that's preventing the sale, and that's what's the issue. Okay, so then we have another question. Just to be clear, things like the pop-up discount to capture mobile numbers needs to be done by working with a third-party Shopify app, correct? Not a functionality that's available on the normal Shopify site setup areas.
That is correct. Yes, you would have to find a third party, and I think the ones I listed here, Attentive, PostScript, and SMS Bump can help you do that. We also provide that that service to brands, but like I mentioned before, we're not really focused on kind of SMS blasts, like once a week kind of things. We're really focused on kind of the payment experience. So if you're leaning more towards collecting phone numbers to get people to buy stuff from you over text, then we can kind of help you collect those phone numbers in a way that's compliant. But if you just want to collect those phone numbers and like send out a message once a month or once a week, then I think you should look at Attentive, PostScript, and SMS Bump, and all of those will help you put something on your site that can collect those phone numbers.
I'm going to ask a clarifying question. So at checkout, you can also have an opt-in checkbox that says, I opt in to either your email or SMS. So that is still part of the Shopify's checkout process, but typically done by a third-party app, or if you're going to collect it, making sure that you are using a third-party app to send out those messages is more important than, in my mind, and perhaps I'm speaking out of turn, but it's more important of how you actually send out that information as opposed to collecting of it, because you're going to collect phone numbers during checkout, for example, and they're going to check a little box that says I accept to receive text messages. But what you don't want to do is literally send a text message from your cell phone to them. Correct, Osa? Is that?
Yes,
Okay.
please do not do that. That is not that's not great, and from a compliance perspective, can put you in some rough situations.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to the email process, right? Where I could collect emails and I can funnel them into my Gmail account, and then I can send out emails that way. But what happens is with email, if you start sending out hundreds or thousands of emails from your Gmail account and not from a third party provider, it's going to look like you're sending out spam. And so you will be marked as such. And that's why many people do use third-party providers, because those email providers have it set up so that they can send out mass emails without being penalized. All right. How many times a week, bi-weekly, monthly, do you send them advertising for your online store? I don't want them to put me on a block file.
Good question. So again, I think Alana, your point earlier was kind of a good way to think about it. I think that's the mental frame I use is if you were on your SMS list, right, or your email list, and you didn't have a financial interest in your business succeeding, how many messages would you get on a weekly basis or monthly basis before you either A, opted out or blocked the person, or B, started ignoring them entirely, right? Because I ignore all of the emails from Macy's, although, you know, I respect their brand. I just ignore their emails, right? Because it doesn't matter to me. I think that's the way you should think about it, because that number could be once a week, right? If you have a really compelling product, if you're releasing new items every week, yeah, it might make sense to send people a text or an email once a week. But if you're only releasing like a 10% off coupon code once a week, but you're sending text messages out, 4 times a week, I think that's a problem, right? So I would say it's definitely case by case dependent, but I would kind of put the question to you and say, how long would you wait before you opted out or blocked the number? And I think that's a better frame.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. I know a lot of folks, my experience is more with email, so that's why I keep referencing back and it's easier for me to process. But a lot of folks that I've seen with e-commerce tend to spend time, once a week, maybe biweekly or monthly, sending out emails. The longer that you go with emails, the harder it is to get that that cadence going with people actually interacting with you. And then some peers that are peers of mine and not within e-commerce themselves, they send out daily emails. And the people that want to see those daily emails will interact with them, and those that don't will opt out. But if the option is to do daily or nothing at all via text message, you're most likely going to get people to opt out, and it's not going to go very well, would be my assumption, just because it's not like with text messages, you can't just ignore it till later. It's just going to have this, little one notification on your cell phone, and it drives me bananas when things have a notification on it. Whereas with email, I could, put it in a bucket to look at it later, and it's easier for me to process when I'm ready. So I do think that there has to be value add, as Osa has mentioned before, but also it has to be timely and appropriate messaging on a regular cadence that you're not going to bombard somebody. Does Shopify have the SMS feature? I think you mean natively.
They do not. No, they do not have a SMS feature that you can use within Shopify. You have to find a third party, like one of the ones we mentioned. One of these platforms, or Parrot Mob is your fourth option.
Does SMS work for premium brands, or is it more effective for small dollar sellers?
Great question. I'm a bit of a contrarian here. I think SMS works for anyone who wants to have a conversation with their customers. I think if you want to just like do the daily emails, I think again, you will see a return, right? Like, let's be clear. If you send enough people a text message, some percentage of them are going to click it, right? So I think it's really a question of what do you mean by work? If the question is, does it drive engagement? I would argue that, well, at some scale, if you text 1,000 people, 20 of them will click your thing and they will go to your site, right? So if that's success for you, then I guess it does work. I think the more important question is, can you get people to buy things from your text messages, right? Whether that's clicking through or just responding yes, like however you want to do it. I think it does work for premium brands, but I think for a premium brand, you have to be very careful to make sure that you don't become the annoying text message, because I would argue that that's worse than people kind of staying on your list. Is people kind of seeing your brand as kind of strange and somewhat annoying, even though you're trying to spend a bunch of money to kind of price yourself as a premium brand, right? So think of Louis Vuitton, for instance. Like, there's a reason you don't receive texts from Louis Vuitton, right? It's because they want to build a premium experience, but over time, of course, they will implement SMS strategy. But I think they're going to be very careful to do that. And I think you as a brand, if you're premium, or it doesn't really matter if you're premium or not, I think you should be very, very careful with how you do it. But I think it's only a matter of time before everyone has to move to SMS.
What kind of recovery rates on cart abandons do you see?
It definitely ranges. We're seeing some customers, recover thousands of dollars a month in revenue, and then we're seeing some folks do quite a bit less than that. So the rates definitely fluctuate anywhere from 2 to 5%, and then we're seeing some folks who are outliers who are doing kind of 20%, but they're definitely smaller. So the recovery rates are good, but I would say it's important to think of the recovery rate for SMS as part of your general conversion optimization strategy. Don't count on SMS to recover carts if your user experience on your site is broken, or if people can't even check out on your site without 20 clicks, right? So I think it's very important to not over rely on SMS to solve the abandoned cart problem, because it can help. But what you don't want to do is text people 20 times when they abandon their cart in an effort to recover them.
I think that's a really great point. And I think that, that goes back to what I was saying before, is like, there's probably a lot of reasons why people are not purchasing from your site. It could be the shipping was astronomical and they weren't prepared to pay double the price of the product that they were going to for shipping. So meaning like not one single thing is going to solve the problem. You have to understand what the problem is. So what oftentimes I've seen with people that is successful is in their abandoned cart emails, instead of trying to say, here, come buy this, don't forget, it's, what caused you to leave, or what issues did you run into during your purchase, or something like that, right? The questions to ask to better understand their experience focuses more on customer service and less on making the sale. And by doing that, you are opening up an avenue to have those conversations, which is what I loved about that video that you shared for Parrot Mob, is it felt more like a conversation as opposed to a hard sell, which is where I don't react to things very well.
Yeah, and I think Alana, you're not alone. I think a lot of folks don't react to it either. A lot of folks don't react to, being sent text messages, every day asking them to buy stuff, right? I think people are very conscious and are very smart, and they know what's what. So I think, to Alana's point, it's very important that if you are going to try to recover some cards, your language should be, more oriented around how you can help the customer rather than, yelling at them for why they didn't buy the thing that they wanted to buy.
Yeah. Okay, I'm about to launch my store and still working on my email sequence using MailChimp, and there's a lot to set up. How much setup is there for, I'm going to just say the platforms, because just to be clear, Osa's not with SMS Bump, so I just want to be platforms in general. How much setup is there for SMS? Does SMS need to be set up before you launch, or do you do it as you go? Can SMS be automated like MailChimp? Better to start with MailChimp and SMS Bump? There's a lot of questions. Basically, what's the order, I think, of operations, and can you do one and not all, or do you need all of them?
Great question. So all of these platforms, Attentive, PostScript, SMS Bump, and Parrot Mob, all offer automated solutions to your SMS marketing, right, and your SMS kind of transaction flows. Again, Parrot Mob is the only solution that kind of lets people pay via text, so it's kind of a different kind of automation. But with all of these platforms, you can automate a large chunk of your SMS kind of outreach. Where Attentive and Parrot Mob are different from the rest of the pack is that we offer what I refer to as managed services, right? So you come to us and we actually work with you on strategy. We work with you on your long-term plan for SMS, what you want to do. We actually sit kind of with your marketing team, and we meet with you once a week to make sure that you're succeeding. So Attentive and Parrot Mob don't make a lot of sense if you're a small brand just getting started and haven't launched yet. I would say if you are a new brand, which again, Alana, correct me if I'm wrong, this question sounds like someone's a new brand. I would say try SMS Bump, try PostScript. I believe SMS Bump has a free plan that you can kind of get in there, play with. They've got some automations or set up for you already. Try PostScript as well. Now, where things get tricky is if you want to get on the phone with someone, or you want an account management team to help you kind of do more advanced stuff. That's kind of where I would say think about Attentive, think about Parrot Mob as being kind of partners with you from an SMS perspective.
Yeah, the only thing I would caution, especially as a new Shopify store, what I tend to see is folks add a bunch of apps trying to see like what works, what doesn't work, and then when you add apps, it adds a lot of weight to your code. And if you delete them later, that oftentimes that code sits there. So please do your research and actually look at the platforms, see what they have to offer. Don't just go with something that someone says this is a great tool for you. Like actually look at it and evaluate it, because I've seen time and time again people add apps and then they delete them and they think the code is gone, and that's not always the case, and it just weighs down your store. And then also you want to make sure that as Osa had mentioned at the beginning, is are they following all the regulations, and what happens to the data that is on their app when and if you leave? Does that get removed from their app? You want to make sure that nothing is going to sit in their hands, so that you're protecting your customers as well. So please do your research and make sure that it's a legit company that you're happy with and that they're going to provide you the service that you need. Don't just go with something that sounds good. On that same line, I also wanted to ask, do these platforms, including Parrot Mob, do they protect you with regards to saying, oh, you can't actually send this email to this person at 11 o'clock at night, so we're going to send it sooner? Or, do they alter it in some way or prevent you from sending it that puts you in hot water?
I so again, Attentive and Parrot Mob, we don't let you send any text messages yourself, um, because we again we don't want to end up in a situation where someone from your team forgets and they accidentally send a message at like, you know 11 p.m. Right? Again, things happen, right? I believe PostScript and SMS Bump allow you to kind of just get in there and do what you will. But I'm not sure. I'm really not sure how folks kind of address that. We take a pretty hard stance and we say, just let us run it for you, and we can give you ability to like customize everything and run it yourself after a while. But we want to make sure that, again, we don't expose you to any risk, but also the converse is true. We don't want to expose ourselves to any risk by kind of letting folks kind of just get in there and do stuff. But again, I've not used PostScript and SMS Bump extensively, but I'm not sure if they have any kind of controls that prevent you from making that kind of mistake.
Okay, cool. I think this is a two-part question. So what can you do to get orders as soon as you launch your store? And out of the three plans, which one works better? I think you're talking about the platforms. I think that's what they're asking. So I don't know that either one of us can probably answer that, because, and I'm going to speak for Osa at the moment, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But I think every app, no matter what it does, works differently for different organizations. So SMS Bump might work well for you. Parrot Mob might work better for somebody else. Like, that's a really difficult question without knowing the context. So whenever someone says, what app do you recommend for XYZ? I'm always like, well, what's your goal? What do you want to accomplish? What are you trying to do? Because there are literally thousands of apps in the App Store, and without having a better understanding of your store and what you're trying to accomplish, I feel like that's a really difficult question for anyone to answer. Sorry, I kind of answered for you, but I feel sort of strongly on that.
Well said. Well said. Ditto.
Okay, and the second part of their question, is there a way that you can get documentation for your store? Like, your store is known anywhere in the world and it's legally registered. Not sure what that means. I don't know if you have an idea what that means, Osa, but.
No, not particularly sure.
Okay. So if you, I think it's Dewana is how you say it. I apologize if I'm saying it wrong. If you can clarify what your question is, I'm happy to try to address that. But your store, so typically, I'm also assuming that you're local. I have no idea, but when you have a business, many people will register their business with their state or local governments. And then you would be able to see that it's legally registered. But if you're out of the US, I apologize, I don't know how that works. But I'm not in a position to give advice on that, so I don't think I could answer that very well. And then there's a question in here about how do you remove code from an app on your store? I apologize if I kind of scared you on that one. So if you are planning to delete an app from your store, if the best thing for you to do is reach out to the app provider and ask them, if you were to delete it, does it automatically remove the code? And if not, ask them to remove the code for you. The app developer should remove that code for you. You should not have to do it yourself. If you delete the app, they no longer have access to your store and they won't be able to do that. You can still reach out to your app developer, but most likely you would have to get into the code to do that. And if you don't feel comfortable removing code, you would want to talk with a Shopify partner who knows the code. And you can do that through reaching out to the Shopify Experts Marketplace, and you can find folks that are in there that will do it for you if you need to. Okay, that's all the questions that I'm seeing. So if there's any other questions, now is a great time to ask them. I'm trying to think if I had anything else that had popped up for me as we were going through it. And I think I asked all my questions as well. Osa, was there anything else that you wanted to make sure that we address?
No, thanks for the opportunity to speak to this community. Really had a great time.
Can you
Fielding these questions.
can you put on your screen real quick the ways to contact you?
Yes. So the best way to contact us is go to parrotmob.com, and if you love to see a demo of the product or learn more, there's a button there that you can use to sign up for our team to reach out to you and kind of learn more.
Perfect. So for those who are already members of the Meetup, I will be posting the next Meetup very soon. I'm thinking probably today or tomorrow, but we will be, as I mentioned before, talking about giving during the holiday season. And if you are not currently a member of the Shopify Meetup, here's a link. That way you can join and be notified whenever we have future meetups. Most likely these will all be virtual in the very near future. So it just opens up that opportunity for those of you who are not local to Portland, Oregon, to still be able to participate. But I do hope to see you all in the future. So Osa, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us this lovely presentation. I'm so excited that we had you here because this was all super foreign to me. And now I don't feel so silly about it. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for organizing this.
Yeah. All right. Take care, everyone. Be safe. Bye-bye.